Okay, well, thank you, Rob, for introducing me as the second speaker in these Fred Talks. I think Fred Talks have been a super innovation, all Rob's idea. And when he asked me to talk, I'm sure he thought I'd be talking about concrete.
I did.
And I said, I will speak on condition it's not concrete. So I thought I'd give a talk about pareidolia. Hands up those of you who, before the talk was announced, had heard of pareidolia. Who knew what it was? No, but not me. So, you know, it's a little known word. And so I thought I'd talk about that. This building has sort of slumped into the shingle at Porlock Weir in Somerset. It's kind of got a bit of character about it, hasn't it? And that's what pareidolia is. Some people get it intensely, and I'm one of them. And I call myself a pareidoliac, which Liz will be interested, is a new word. I've actually copywritten it, and it's my word. So pareidoliac is a sufferer, as the Daily Mail called them once, a sufferer of pareidolia. The Daily Mail ran an article about pareidolia and said sufferers don't need to be concerned about, you know, being criticised because it means that their brains are well wired. I think tonight's evidence with the clickers shows that mine aren't really, but you know, never mind. So, this is about pareidolia, or my journey to post-impressionism. And Rob's already wondering what the hell I'm talking about post-impressionism for. To start off the journey, I've got to give you a bit of background about my beginnings. I was parked in a small bedroom, 7 foot by 7 foot, for 18 years. I did come out to go to school and play football and so on for a while. But within that very small room, there was a sort of personal world, and no central heating or heat in the house at all. It was very cold, a lot of ice in the winter, cold winters in the 50s and 60s. And I used to study the ice patterns inside the window all the time. Some of you would have seen the ice on the cars today and on your windows, and how fantastic it was this morning. And then I used to look at the wallpaper and the curtains. There's a curtain that's not actually my curtain from those days, but you can see a face very easily in that curtain. And I used to get that all the time. I had a monkey puzzle tree outside the window. If you know what a monkey puzzle is, a Chilean pine, which they were sort of a bit of a fashion in the 30s. And this was a huge monkey puzzle. If I'd have wanted to, I could have escaped from my bedroom by climbing down it. It was so close. But it cast colours and shapes. One of my favourite books was Grimm's Fairy Tales, which had some, the edition I had some really quite grotesque illustrations, but I loved it, loved the book. And all of that use of the imagination came out in repetitive nightly dreams or nightmares, which I had for many years, and that's true. I had it for about 10 years, night after night, with the creatures from my imagination. So all this, I think, built up into me being a pareidoliac. There's a chap called James Wells French, who's a wooden chap on Facebook today. And today's been a highly pareidolia day for me. And I saw these photos of his ice patterns on his conservatory. And I thought that's pretty. And then I saw this in James's picture. Now, you either get it or you don't. But to me, that is a very clear type of creature, or even a human being, sort of medieval picture. So that's the sort of oddball that I can be. So pareidolia is, this is an official definition, psychological phenomenon in which the mind responds to a stimulus by perceiving a familiar pattern where none exists. As I've just said, the Daily Mail says sufferers, exclamation mark, because I think it's a great thing. But sufferers exhibit signs of a well-wired brain. Me, I'm not sure about that, because not only have I cocked up on the clickers, but and Lynn will tell you, I cannot tie my shoelaces. And I can't. I was top of the class at school all the way through from infants to junior school, and the headmistress at my infant school just gave up on me because I couldn't tie shoelaces, and I can't now. And that means that I am wired up slightly different. And sometimes I have highly pareidolia sensitivity days, which today is one. And to prove it again, I looked at this picture today of a DVD that I did a few years ago of Tiny Bottom. And for the first time ever, I saw a face in that picture. You see that those beams that are coming down, there's one very bright beam in the middle, and there's a face above it that is puffing down that bright. And I hadn't spotted that until today. I'm not saying you'll see that entirely if you go up Tiny Bottom. So there are sort of, I think, very interesting natural or unintended examples of pareidolia. There are some that are not so great, where it becomes sort of kitsch and where it's deliberate or contrived. And unfortunately, Photoshop has screwed up a lot of this because people are inventing pareidolia images where they don't exist and using them for advertising and all sorts. So it's a slightly confusing picture. These are the, I'd say, the mildly interesting ones, and you can make money from it. This piece of toasted cheese sandwich did actually, it shows the Virgin Mary quite clearly on the left, and it did sell. It was sold to a casino for $28,000. I'm not going to say, yeah, sucker maybe, I don't know. And then there's that famous toasted cheese sandwich at the top right that fetched a few pounds, and then there's an example from Mexico, which was a sort of flatbread with Jesus on the top. Tread carefully here. I tread carefully here. There's a birch tree that I think is pretty impressive, isn't it? You could sort of believe what you want to see, I suppose. And phenomena of this sort can give power over people. Turin Shroud, I'm not going to go. That could be the source of a new Fred talk by somebody who knows about the Turin Shroud, what the truth is. Somebody probably knows what the truth is in this audience. I don't. But I would say that pareidoliacs like me can be vulnerable if you're not self-aware about your own vulnerability. So. These sorts of things are not quite so interesting. Where people do manipulate them for. These are amusing but contrived. So, and there are plenty in Wootton. If you walk around Wootton, I haven't taken my camera out today to get Wootton pictures, but there are a few in Wootton, which are. I don't think they're contrived in Wootton. If you look at the British Legion, the British Legion always looks in a bad mood along Old Town. And there are fake pareidolia. Now these are fake. It looks quite funny, but it's not real pareidolia because somebody's been along and punched 2 nail holes in each can. So it is a setup. It's not photoshopped. It's just a setup. And that's quite impressive, but it's not really. It's not an accidental happening. It's contrived, isn't it?
It's very good dental work.
Now this is disturbing to a lot of vegetarians because it does show that vegetables feel pain, and I'm sure all of you who've cut open a pepper have seen them like that, and it does give you a bit of a shock, doesn't it? Hey? You've been there, haven't you? You wonder whether you're doing the right thing. The use of Pareidolia as a tourist attraction. Normally it's rock formations and geology. These are Victorian Edwardian postcards of natural bits of the landscape where profiles actually show or purport to show people. I haven't found one of Donald Trump yet, but I'm still looking for it. But these are two of my own. That's a piece of wood. That's just the knot pattern that formed in a piece of wood. You could argue whether it's a polar bear or a Labrador. Does everybody see that? Yeah. And this is one that just made my day. I had a mini stereo system delivered a few years ago, and when I got the packaging out, I thought, this is amazing. You know, this isn't contrived, and this is just two people having a conversation. And I kept this packaging. Normally, you know, you don't keep it, but it's got character, hasn't it? Now, this is one of my favourites. I love collecting stones, as Lynn will tell you. I've got a garage full of bits of stone. This is a man in Japan. Any stone or rock that he's found that has a face or the look of a face attached to it, he's put into a museum. And it's in northern Japan, and I haven't got the opening times for you, but it's a museum of rock faces. And, you know, you might think it's idiotic. It probably is idiotic, but it shows you how this can get hold of you. I rather like those rocks with faces on them. If anybody's got any, I'd love to have some. Oh, Lynn says not. Right, on to one or two myths and legends. Of course, the moon, we've had these big moons recently, the blood moon. And Ros was saying that she saw the rabbit, moon rabbit.
They were explaining about the Chinese see a rabbit in the moon where we see a face, and for the first time I saw it. On that night.
Yeah. So there are legends in a lot of countries about the moon. The moon rabbit is one of them. I've put that silly picture in the middle. That's from an early 1902 fantasy film, Le Voyage dans la Lune, which is on YouTube if you want to look at it. But all sorts of, we haven't got time to go through all the lunar, but there's the moon rabbit. That's exactly what Ros saw. In Japan, off the coast of Japan, there was an actual incident in the Middle Ages where there was a battle, and a shipload of samurai warriors was dispatched to the bottom of the sea, and they all drowned. And the myth was put into pictorial form. You can see here an anchor, and there are the warriors at the bottom of the sea. And to the top left, you see the crabs going up to the surface. Those crabs are the spirits of the samurai that were drowned in the battle. And if you look at the actual samurai crab, for there is such a creature, and look on the shell, and they're all different, and they all have a kind of samurai warrior. Now, obviously, there's no link between samurai drowned warriors and crabs. But, you know, where did that pattern come from? How did it evolve, and so on? So you can see why myths and legends get built around visual images like that. The Green Man, which is, you know, such a big symbol in rural England. That's not him, by the way, but that's a concrete replica. I knew I'd get concrete into it somewhere. Available in all garden centres, but the whole area around Wootton, the forests and the woods that we've got, are full of examples of character in old trees. The one I'm going to show you is not from Wootton, it's from the Savernake Forest in Wiltshire near Marlborough. And it was actually on a Facebook page of lovely trees. and nobody had spotted the Pareidolia in it until I pointed it out. And at the top right, you see a dragon, or a man with a beard, but I see a dragon there. That's actually, it's a hornbeam in the Savernake forest, a white hornbeam. Our landscapes are obviously full of myths to do. We've already looked at a few profiles of rock faces and mountains and cliffs. I got a message this week from Ishmael Cavazos, and Ishmael is a professional peanut carver. He saw the potential in a peanut. When you take a peanut, it opens in two, and at the top of the nut is a germ, and he saw the germ as the beard of an old man. So he's actually turned this into a business, and he carves little old men out of peanuts and sells them. And he's actually called himself a master of abstract extractionism. And you shouldn't laugh, because he's actually now moving into new digital currencies, and he's working on ways of putting these digital currencies into artistic form to lock in their secrets and their value. So that's scope for another Fred talk in the future. But Ishmael has told me about this white woman or sleeping woman mountain called Iztaccíhuatl, which is next to the volcano called Popocatépetl in Mexico. And you can see there it's a sleeping woman. If you sort of close your eyes, half close your eyes, you can see that. And that's given rise to a lot of local legends. Now, finally, the road to post-impressionism. This is a cliff face near Boscastle, just north of Boscastle Harbour. And this is an outcrop of quartz in the rock to the left, and it looks like an old lady sitting down. And it's caught many people out who've seen this figure across the valley and gone across and discovered that it's a vein of quartz. It's not been carved by a man, or it's just the way that nature is. Mm-hmm. So the road to post-impressionism is in Boscastle. In fact, it's in Boscastle Harbour. I'm a member of the Boscastle Sculpture Group for the last few years, and in 2016 we had a project all about myths and legends, and I walked down to the harbour, and Lynn and I had seen this post before, and I got a bit closer to the post. There's a series of posts along the harbour, but this one is amazing because it has real character, and it has so much character that I fear for it. We were down in Sussex a few years ago, and we found lots of groins along the coast, really lovely pitch pine groins, and a local told us that gangs from London were coming out and chainsawing these groins off and selling them for £500-600 a piece. So I do worry about this one in Boscastle. And that's the reason that I like it. It's absolutely jam-packed with little people. So I wanted to preserve these little creatures, so I started to take impressions of them in clay, and that's what you see on the left. So the technique of post-impressionism started in Boscastle. Okay.